So did you know that in the year 2010, the insurance company Allstate paid a $10 million settlement to insurance regulators regarding its use of software that valued personal injury claims? Instead of allowing adjusters to use their own independent human judgment to evaluate claims like yours, car wreck claims, injury claims, Allstate was using a software, and they were using it in a way deliberately designed to undervalue these claims and to maximize the bottom line for the insurance company. So they were slapped with a lawsuit and a $10 million settlement. Why is that important? Well, that's still the case that insurance companies are using software to evaluate not just car wreck claims, but basically all sorts of insurance claims, specifically bodily injury claims, using a software often called Colossus or some variation of that. And so what that means is it's very important, if you've got an injury claim, that you have a lawyer who understands how to translate and express your claim in terms that this silly software will value and provide the most payout for. So it's almost like a game that is being played between injury lawyers like us and the insurance company and their software, where we have to know the intricacies of that system and how to get the right inputs into that system on your behalf so that you get the most compensation that you deserve. What does this mean in practice? Let me give you an easy example. This can be as simple as finding all of your injuries. I know that sounds maybe strange, but because you think, well, I was in a car accident, my neck hurts, my back hurts, I got a concussion. Well, maybe, but it could be that you also complained of lower hip pain, or pain in your knee, or pain in your lower back, or pain in your right arm. And each of these little pain areas can have its own diagnostic injury code. And that is what the system that the insurance companies use looks for. Diagnostic codes documenting your injury. And the more of these injuries you've got, the more value they assign to your claim. Another thing to know is that each injury is almost like its own settlement demand. What do I mean by that? So for each injury, you can talk about how it affected your life. Let's say you've got a sprain in your right knee, among many other things, right? Let's say you had a concussion and a lower back injury and a sprained ankle, but let's talk about just the knee and how the knee means that you can't maybe play golf that you love to do. Maybe you can't work, or maybe you can't do the activities, daily activities, lifting your child to give them a bath, for example. Each injury has to have its own sort of discussion and workup for how it affected your life. That's called duties under duress or loss of enjoyment of life. And the insurance companies will allow you to make that kind of argument to express the full extent of each injury. And if your lawyer just says, well, here are all the injuries and here's how it affected your life in one big kind of generalized statement, you might be leaving money on the table because you could maximize your recovery. If your lawyer really knew how to kind of game their system, how to play their game, which is what this video is all about. Another important thing to understand is that the insurance companies and their system will look at the kind of treatment you've got and specifically the credentials of the providers. So for example, sometimes car wreck lawyers will refer their clients out to a bunch of treating providers, including chiropractors or physical therapy type clinics, and try to drive up the treatment value, try to drive up the number of visits and the medical bills, because that is something that the insurance companies look at. They look at what are the medical specials, total medical bills, and if you can get that number higher, then generally you can get more money. Except that you can go too far. And if you've got too much care, too many visits to the chiropractor, too much physical therapy, then the system's not going to give you credit for that. So you got to kind of know, for example, that most of these systems will say 20 chiropractor visits is the max. And if you go 25 times, those extra 5 times, you're now going to owe the chiropractor for that. But if the insurance company is not going to give you any credit for it, then it's not adding any value to your claim. In fact, it's taking your net recovery back because you're going to have to pay back the chiropractor and the insurance company is not compensating you for it. Now, obviously, if you need the care, you need the care, but that's just something to know, right? Is that if you're trying to maximize your value and your claim and play this game with the insurance companies, you do not want to overtreat. You do not want your lawyer referring you for care that maybe perhaps unnecessary or excessive in the eyes of the insurance company because they won't compensate you for it. You got to kind of know where these limits are. The last thing I want to talk about is I think our real goal as car wreck, trucking accident lawyers dealing with insurance companies in these sorts of, computerized assessments of your claims is to get them to turn the system off. And you can do that. You can get outside the system if you've got certain arguments, if you've got certain injuries specifically. Certain injuries like brain injuries or concussive injuries tend to, allow for more human judgment in the claim. And they might use the software to some extent, but they might have a supervisor override or a human element that can come in. We're always trying to get that. If we can get away from what the system is just going to churn out in a sort of automated way and talk to an individual and make an individualized case for you about why your claim shouldn't just be treated like, a set of inputs in a computer program, that's our job. That's what I think is our obligation to you, is to try to make a case for you as an individual on your behalf. So if you find this video helpful, watch this next video on why you probably should get a lawyer if you've been injured in a car accident, truck accident, motorcycle accident. Let us know if we can help.